Well, good afternoon, everyone. As all of you all know, I generally tried not to get into the presidential race with comments, but I would mention that Donald Trump called this morning, had a good conversation, and I appreciated his call, and I took the opportunity to recommend to him that no matter who may be triggering these violent expressions or conflicts that we've seen in some of these rallies, it might be a good idea to condemn that and discourage it, no matter what the source of it is. Second, with regard to the Senate schedule, tomorrow we'll have an opportunity, I hope, to begin to move forward to solve this GMO labeling problem. This is a huge issue. Senator Roberts and Senator Stabenow have been trying to reach an agreement. Unless something's happened in the last 30 minutes, I don't think the agreement's been reached yet. But we need to vote on that tomorrow, see if the Senate wants to take it up and work its will and solve this problem, which is going to cost American consumers an enormous amount of money if we don't get it fixed. The final point I would make, we're getting close, about a month away, to beginning to process appropriation bills. The Senate is committed to taking them up. I intend to spend up to 12 weeks processing individual appropriation bills. We're going to make every effort we can to get back to some kind of semblance of normalcy in the business of funding the federal government, which we're supposed to do under the law each year. With that, let me turn it over to Senator Cornyn.
Well, we're told that any day the White House is going to send over a nominee for the vacancy created by the death of Justice Scalia. And I guess it shouldn't surprise any of us that they've been rather slow to do it. And I and others have observed who would want to accept that nomination knowing that you're not going to be confirmed and knowing the difficulty of the confirmation process. Some people have been critical of the description of the confirmation process, but I'd like to point out the politicalization of the nominations process to the Supreme Court is one created by our Democratic friends. It goes way back, starting with people like Bob Bork, Clarence Thomas, who called his confirmation a high-tech lynching, the filibuster of circuit court judges, and then court like Miguel Estrada and Priscilla Owen, Bill Pryor, and others. And then, of course, we know that Joe Biden, as far back as 1992, advocated not filling a vacancy created during the last year of the president's term of office, something that Harry Reid agreed to in 2005, saying it's the president's prerogative to nominate, but there's no obligation on behalf of the Senate to consent. And then, of course, Senator Schumer in 2007. So all we're asking for is that the same standard be applied when the Republicans are in the majority as when Democrats are in the majority, and not a double standard. We believe it's not an unreasonable position to take to say the American people in the course of this presidential election that their voice should be heard in this process, particularly where the balance of power on the Supreme Court is going to be determined perhaps for the next 25 or 30 years. So we're going to have taken a position, I believe, based on principle and not personality, and that is no matter who the president nominates, that this vacancy ought to be appointed by the next president after the American people have had their voice heard.
Next week will be the 6th anniversary of the signing of the health care law, the health care law's 6th birthday, and people all around the country, millions, will certainly not be celebrating the impact of this law on their lives. It's interesting watching the minority leader, Harry Reid, on the floor of the Senate saying that the numbers are incredible and they continue to improve. And then Hillary Clinton, at a town hall meeting on CNN the other night, was asked by an Obama supporter, someone who wants to vote for the former secretary for president, and said, but look, my premiums have doubled under Obamacare. What can you do for me? And the former Secretary of State said, well, you should go shopping on the exchange. That's their answer to a doubling of premium to their own supporters. So it just seems to me that Hillary Clinton and Harry Reid are both living in denial of Obamacare. That's what we're seeing. The reason that Harry Reid is the minority leader now and that Nancy Pelosi is no longer Speaker of the House is because of the direct impact the health care law has had on the families of this country. You remember the president saying, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Well, that was labeled the lie of the year. You remember the president saying your rates would drop by $2,500 a year. Instead, they've gone up by $4,000. And for people even with the cheapest, the least expensive policy, the bronze policies last year on average, they went up 13%. And the deductibles went up 7%. We know that now 12 of the 23 co-ops have failed. And what that means is 700,000 people that got their insurance through those co-ops lost their insurance, and the American taxpayers lost over $1 billion. And last Friday night in a White House data dump, they've come out to prove that the number of people that actually had Obamacare insurance at the end of the year was 25% lower than it was at the beginning of the year, because people sign up and they don't necessarily pay. So yes, there are some people that were helped by the Obama health care law, but NPR did a survey, and 1 in 4 Americans will say that they have personally been harmed by the Obama health care law. 1 in 4 Americans personally harmed. Not that they know somebody that's been harmed, but they have been harmed personally. That's why this law is so unpopular, because most people feel for themselves it's not a good idea. Doesn't work, not a good deal. So here we are at the 6th birthday of Obamacare. Harry Reid, Mrs. Clinton can say whatever they like. These are not signs of success. This is a sign of failure.
Yeah, let me just add one thing. I'll take a couple of questions. You know, we've had a regularly scheduled election every 2 years since 1788, and I don't think the fact that there's an election coming up is a good reason for not acting on things that we can agree on. And my decision in scheduling matters for the balance of the year is going to be to focus on things where there's pretty broad bipartisan agreement, where we can make some progress for the country, even though we have big differences on a whole lot of other things, the biggest one obviously the Supreme Court. So I appreciated the letter I got from Senate Democrats saying they wanted to have a normal appropriations process. That's exactly what we have in mind. And after the recess, very shortly after the recess, we'll be turning to these appropriation bills.
Leader McConnell,
Yeah.
what is your reaction to Russia's announcement that it's withdrawing its troops from Syria?
Well, I will see whether that continues. And I think one announcement from Vladimir Putin is not terribly convincing, but we'll see what they do.
Well, if it does continue, I mean, what does it say, do you think, about the administration's policy in Syria and any other
Well, look, Syria is a pretty big mess. The president had an opportunity early on when it looked like Bashar Assad could be toppled to be more assertive, chose not to, and now it's a pretty big quagmire. We'll see whether the Russians are going to go beyond an announcement. If they do, it'll be an interesting observation for all of us to behold.
Senator McConnell, would you move on lower-level lifetime nominations for district courts that have bipartisan agreement at this point?
Yeah, we've continued to talk about the way forward on judges. We've confirmed a number of them this year, and we'll continue to do that for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
Senator McConnell, you've obviously made taking back the Senate, keeping the Senate, your number one political goal. But when you look at what's happening for the Republican presidential race, and you mentioned the violence, the protests, the Trump rallies, et cetera, how much concern do you have that could hurt your ability to keep control of the Senate?
Well, I mean, just the numbers. You all know there are 24 of us up and only 10 of theirs. We're more on defense this cycle than we were last cycle, obviously. We're going to have a number of competitive races, and we're going to give it everything we've got. And Senate Republicans are absolutely committed to doing everything it takes to hold this majority. We think it makes a huge difference for the country, whether voters currently realize it or not. There's hardly anything we did last year that would have been called up had the Democrats still been in the majority. And so it makes a big difference to the country who is calling the plays, who is setting the agenda, even though we don't get everything we want, we're at least able to have the debate on the issues that we think make a difference for the country, and so we're going to fight very hard to hold on.
Did you speak with Donald Trump about any policy issues, TPP, for example, or anything else, policy-wise?
Yeah, he called me. I assume it was just sort of to reach out, and we had a good conversation, and I mentioned to him that I thought it would be a good idea for him, no matter who starts these violent episodes, to condemn it and discourage it.
What was his reaction to that? Did he say that he would?
Why wouldn't you say it should be? You should reject all violence and call for an end to this.
I'm not sure I understand your question. I'm quoting myself and what I said to him.
But why wouldn't you come up more forcefully about telling him he needs to really step it up and be a leader and tell people to not act like that a little bit?
Because I believe that the candidates ought to be discouraging, no matter who starts the fight, that I believe all the candidates on both sides should be discouraging violence. We ought to be able to have civil discourse and a big, robust debate in this country. We've been doing it for a very long time.
What was his response?
Yeah, I'm only going to quote myself.
Senator, what does it say, I mean, condemning violence includes something of a no-brainer. What does it say about Trump's judgment or temperament that this is something he actually needs to be reminded of would be a good idea?
You know, one of the things I thought you guys had learned is I'm pretty good at not answering questions I don't want to answer. I've already said all I'm going to say about the reaching out of Donald Trump to me. I appreciated the call, and I told you what I had to say. Thanks a lot.